I know it's always difficult to pinpoint the exact definition of an artistic concept, and I think documentary theater is one of those, most controversial terms, I think, nowadays, because I've heard a lot of different labels: verbatim theater, documentary theater, or research-based theater. That's the one I'm going to Vancouver to participate in in a symposium, but I know that you prefer to use the theater of the real in your writing. So why, and what's the difference or similarity between theater of the real with the other terms, documentary theater, verbatim theater?
So. Yeah, I mean, it's difficult and somewhat artificial to kind of name something. So theater of the real might be as problematic as documentary theater. I mean, is documentary theater made from documents? Is it theater that documents something? Is it theater that does both those things? How loyal is it to documents? I can think of, there's a wonderful play called The Colour of Justice out of the UK about the murder of Stephen Lawrence, a young black man, and that is made from an inquiry. It's all transcripts from an inquiry, and from those transcripts we learn 10 to 12 years of history around this case, and the inquiry makes clear what many British people had suspected all along about this case. So it does a work of kind of radical condensation and summary of material, but it also has its own dramatic arc. In that particular play, we do meet the criminals in their own words as they were secretly recorded by the police. So yes, so it does something unique in that it is both made from documentary evidence or trial inquiry, transcripts, and it documents a certain historical moment in the UK in which there was a very important determination on the part of the inquiry, and that was there was such a thing as unconscious racism. So the reason why I kind of shifted to theater of the real is because the work I was seeing, work done by artists, was more expansive than literally documenting something, and made in ways other than only using documents verbatim. So I actually have a very neat definition in my book. Yes. So sometimes it's, people write things better than they actually speak them spontaneously or extemporaneously. So here's actually what I say. While there may be no universal agreement on individual terms, there is an emerging consensus that theater of the real includes, so it's a larger category, includes documentary theater, verbatim theater, reality-based theater, theater of fact, theater of witness, tribunal theater, nonfiction theater. And here's now a kind of expansion of the notion of the form: restored village performances, war and battle reenactments, and autobiographical theater. And now you're adding that research-based theater is also closely related to documentary theater. I probably would agree with that. So here's the point. All of these types of theater, so there are many types, and they're made from many different kinds of processes. So all these types of theaters claim a special relationship to reality, a relationship that has generated both textual and performance innovations. The array of terms indicates a range of methods of theatrical creation that are not always discrete but may overlap and cross-fertilize. So, and the methods includes theater created verbatim use of transcripts. So that's really what I think the Tectonic Theater Company was doing, verbatim, going in, using interviews, right? They used some documents from the trial, but they were also witnesses at the trial, many of them. Facts, trials, autobiography, interviews, theater created from reenacting the experience of witnesses, portraying historic events, and reconstructing real places. Theater created from the internet, including YouTube and Facebook, and any combination of these. So so even when we think about something like the Laramie Project, for example, in its first iteration, it was kind of verbatim documentary. But it is one of the most produced plays in the United States. In its next iteration, it's not at all the same, because the actor's saying, "Hi, I'm Greg Perotti," is not Greg Perotti. So that iteration of these are the people who made this, and we're telling you the story that we were literally there to record, it moves in a certain sense. The story is still real, but the production of the story has greater fictional elements because the actors are not who they say they are when they perform it. So and I think that's totally fine and totally legitimate. So but the question is, how do we conceptualize that? So I was looking for an expansive phrase that includes the expansive play between fiction or with fiction and nonfiction, and I tend to think of documentary as literally made from documents, and that's one approach. That's one kind of process. So that's what I was thinking, and I'll talk about this more, but I think it also accounts for a lot of the work that's going on today, which may not be strictly documentary, but is in the spirit of the original documentary theater, which was to capture the real and bring it onto the stage.
Yeah. So your choice, for example, like you, of course, when you say documentary, theater of the real, you highlight the term real. So you picked. Why don't you use reality? What's the difference between real and reality? Why don't you say theater of the reality?
Well, I still think reality is what is off stage, right? And theater of the real is trying to represent that, but it is definitely not that. So I still make a division between the stage world, which is its own reality for sure, but it's not the reality like off stage, right? So that's an important distinction, I think.
So you
also I did it. You can do these crazy internet searches like of the New York Times, and how many times is the word real used, and it is so huge. So I was also thinking of this is like an operative notion of the moment, but the moment has been for like 5, 6, 7, 8 years now that real is used over and over and over again. And it's important that it signifies something that is apart from our daily reality, which is all about the virtual, and the internet and the digital. So we're underscoring real in ways that I think we need to pay attention to.
And so my next question will be, because last time when I was in New York, I said it's already a decade ago, and last time when I was here, I can still feel the legacy or the impact of some classical masterpieces in the United States, like Laramie Project, like the Exonerate, and so I think at that time documentary theater was still the trend in the United States. but I don't know whether it's because I'm in Hong Kong and I haven't been here for 10 years. And it seemed to me that documentary theater is more or less out of the trend here. Or I've heard about any significant pieces in this genre, if I can say this is a genre. So can you let me know a bit about the recent development of this theater of the real or documentary theater in New York, in the United States?
I mean, I don't think I've seen much work that calls itself documentary theater lately, but I've seen, a fair amount of work that is, that is playing with stage world and real world complications. Like, I thought I would die, but I didn't. The piece I sent you to, where in the third act, a woman comes on stage and says she's the playwright, and now she's going to tell us the story that is the story that inspired the play, and it is her own personal real story of a murder that happened in the apartment downstairs. So we both had questions. Is this for real? Is this the playwright on stage? I had to look it up, and no, it was an actor playing the playwright. And I still don't know if this is the real story that the playwright is telling us that really inspired the play. So I think it's that kind of blurring of fiction and nonfiction that we see a lot. There was, I must say, the Wooster Group did a play a while ago, like within the past 8 or 9 months, called The Pink Chair. And it is about Cantor, and Liz Lecomte actually worked with Cantor's daughter to make the play. And it's a kind of homage. It's a kind of recounting of his directorial work. It is about him. It's about a moment in theater history, but in no way is it a documentary. So it's that kind of thing that I see a lot of going on, those kind of blurred boundaries, and the pleasure of uncertainty, like, is this or isn't it? As a kind of liminal, provocative space.
Do you think is it just something out of the trend? Is it a reason why documentary theater? I know Anna David Smith is still working on this genre, sort
true,
of.
she is, right.
But it seems that other than that, for example, like the playwrights of I forgot the name of the playwrights of the Exonerate. What's the playwright's name? But I haven't seen any output from the two playwrights recently. And also it seems that Moses Kaufman has turned away from this genre, sort of.
Right.
So do you think there's a reason behind, or is just, it's out of the trend at this moment? Yeah.
I don't know. In other words, I think just to work from documents is very limited, and it involves a lot of editing, a lot of shaping of material. I think, that the creative process should be expansive. So I don't know whether, someone like Moises Kaufman said, well, I don't know where to go with the form, or he just got interested in something else. I really don't know. But it's quite possible that someone will come back with some kind of revision of the form that we haven't anticipated. That would be exciting, right? Yeah.
So, coming back to the situation in America. So within these 10 years, I think from 2008, when I was in New York, till now, is there any particular piece that you think worth mentioning in this genre, theater of the real or documentary theater?
I don't know. Nothing comes to mind. I mean, there's 2008. The Laramie Project 10 years after might be 2009, right? So that's a significant piece. that redresses the 2020 News Magazine program, which
Yes.
called into question the Laramie Project. And, as you know, Matthew Shepard was just recently buried last year. So, because his parents didn't want his resting place to be defiled in any way, which is disturbing and stunning. But nothing comes to mind, off the top of my head. Here in the U.S., I think that there's some interesting stuff going on in Europe for sure. But no.
Yeah. So it goes to my next question. So how about the world? And I know that you are also, last time when you were in Hong Kong, you introduced to us some.
Oh, I have to say, there's this piece called Network. It's an import from the UK. It has documentary aspects. Yeah, and there's now another piece on Broadway called Ink. These are, I'm not sure how documentary they actually are, but they have that impulse in them. So, the work of the moment, I think, is definitely Milo Rao. I mean, I think he's absolutely stunning. And by the way, he calls his work Theater of the Real, and which makes me very happy. But I think that he's doing very successfully some of the stuff that people wanted to do or did do, like the Laramie Project shows its constructedness in the world of the work, right? It shows how they made it. I think that Milo Rao is also, he's showing how he makes the work, kind of. So in his 5 Easy Pieces about Marc Dutroux, the Belgian pedophile murderer, he stages a audition with the children who are going to perform the work. And, the work is so perfectly structured that I don't know if the audition that he stages is actually verbatim from the auditions that he constructed. And in other words, in each case, are those the words the child spoke when they were being auditioned? I highly doubt it. But it's presented as that. In other words, but maybe all the material came from the auditioning of many children. Who knows? But the story he tells about Dutroux and Belgian colonialism is definitely in the mode of Theater Real. It's definitely putting together two things that had never been put together before. So the devastation of this murderer who went unchecked for far too many years, the suspicion that there was a pedophile ring that the police were covering up, and also the abiding consequences of the brutality, the unique brutality of Belgian colonialism. That, he's not only saying, the crimes abroad are mirrored at home. He's saying there's a deep psychic connection between these kinds of acts. So, and it does have an interview with Dutroux's father, and the children kind of ostensibly tell their own stories as well, but they also talk about acting, right, in ways that are interesting and discomforting at the same time. So I think that piece and La Reprise about the murder of Issana Yarfi in Liège, Belgium, use similar devices in that in La Reprise there's also an audition, and there's the question. So there's in both pieces there's a parallel question. How did this pedophile murderer become a pedophile murderer? It's a kind of intrinsic question, not an overt question, and one that is never directly answered. But in La Reprise is, how does an actor become a character? And how does a man become a murderer? So I think Rao is putting together in very interesting ways how we make the world of theater and how we make the world outside the theater's door in a certain way. And La Reprise is about a real murder, and there's a wonderful beginning where an actor does a soliloquy from Hamlet, the ghost soliloquy, and but in that he points out, like by implication, that theater itself is an act of ghosting. That we're bringing the dead back to life in a certain way, right? With this enterprise of theater the real. And why are we doing that? To what end? To what purpose? And what is this kind of deep structure of theatrical reality that engages us? I mean, I just find the work like so fascinating and more complicated and or more sophisticated in its sense of theatricality and what theatricality does than I've ever really seen before. So I think that's very exciting. I didn't see Lamb Gods, or now he's done an Oresteia. An Oresteia? Yeah, I think an Oresteia, which I haven't seen either, which is going on now. Yeah. So I think, Milo Rao's been at this for a long time, been developed. I think his first piece about the Ceausescus was more in the mode of documentary. He reenacted their trial and their murder or assassination or execution. Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's sort of moved away
from that into something that's still about critiquing and engaging the real world, but with different methods.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've heard that Stephen, Remini Protocol, Stefan, he says maybe one of the reasons why, because he thinks they can be categorized as documentary theater, because I think they are both he and Rao was coming from a journalistic background, so I think he thinks so. That's why they are more concerned about society stuff and documents. So yes, but but both of them were a little bit reserved in labeling themselves as documentary theater.
Yeah. I mean, Rimini Protocols also continues to do interesting things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So apart from, of course, Minoru is a big name now internationally. So apart from him, is there any other particular works that come to your mind in the world that you can introduce a bit to us?
Nothing comes to mind. I mean, I live in New York, so I have a limited access to European theater. I'll try to follow it as much as possible, but I'm sure there must be other things going on, and maybe even other things in the United States on the West Coast. But I definitely don't know everything. That's for sure.
There are some examples from your book. This one, Dramaturgy of the
Real. Yeah. So I'm sure there's still this kind of theater in South Africa. I mean, Yael Farber continues to work kind of in relationship to this mode. Yes, and also there have been some interesting works in Poland, and they just came out. There's actually a wonderful work about a mayor who came out as transsexual, that he was going to undergo this process, and how his family and his town reacted. It's a very wonderful play. It's in a book in my series called the name of the book is Apollonia, a collection of contemporary, more or less Polish plays. Yeah, I mean, people are always mentioning stuff to me, like but I can't really hold on to it unless I see it.
What,
Yeah.
Apollonia is...
Apollonia,
is-
yeah. It is I don't even know if I have a copy here. So it's in this series called In Performance.
Okay.
And it's plays in translation from all over the world. And it's a collection of Polish plays in translation.
Yeah, I should look it up. It sounds interesting.
Yeah,
the topic,
yeah. Oh, yeah, it's very
Yeah,
interesting.
yes.
Yeah.
So it's based on the real story, or...
It's based on a real story, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
But it's composed of verbatim stuff, or...
I don't know. I don't think it's verbatim per se, but it is his story.
Yeah. Okay, so my last question is, as I said, there's always one thing. When I start introducing documentary theater to Hong Kong, I think a few years ago, at that time I was fascinated by documentary theater because, well, Lermy is the first one I heard about and saw in this genre, and I was really fascinated by how it can bridge the gap between theater and society. As I see it in Hong Kong, there's really a gap between theater and society, and but there's always this question in my mind: is it really a good way to fill in the gap or to tackle the gap between theater and society, even though I introduced it to Hong Kong? And so what's the situation like in America between the relationship between theater and society? Is it something... I think it's a very big question.
It's a big question. I think that there are definitely more dramas on Broadway, which is only one tiny measure of reality. I think that people go to the theater to learn something, right? Mm-hmm. Even you can go to a new production of a play that you've already that you know well, but you're looking to absorb the new production so that you know something else. Like Ivo van Hove did a production of The Crucible on Broadway, and it was extraordinary, and it was extraordinary because it was, in my mind, in relationship scenically with a production of Lupa, who's a Polish director, and he did a great piece called Heldenplatz. Unbelievable. And that is where Hitler gave his first speech in Vienna, the name of the plaza. And both pieces were very much about the presence and slow rise of fascism, right? That's not how we normally understand The Crucible. But Ivo van Hove kind of turned the work a bit to make it in conversation with contemporary U.S., at least in my mind, now. So I think that, there are different theater audiences. Some people would seek out a work, that is in conversation with the world as we know it, or as we would like to know it better. And some people really only want entertainment. That's a huge spectrum of theater audiences, and I think that's fine in a certain way. I mean, I tend to weigh heavily in on the more serious stuff. But I think that Network and now Ink is the second work on Broadway about the media, about which people are very concerned. How does it work? How do we get to know what we do know? And then theater comes in as yet another interloper in how we get to know what we know. But what else is there? Yeah.
I think that it's just my personal, not a question, but a personal feeling. I think, the pity is Hong Kong, we haven't yet developed the that kind of the audience that will love to not just want entertainment, that will love to be inspired and educated. And yeah, the pity is we haven't developed enough audience for that. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Who is your audience?
Well, my theater company, we do have some theater audience. I would say some fans. I would say, but it's not a big amount. Or for example, like 200 people, I think. Yeah.
And they're very educated?
Most of them are to my theater audience.
Right.
By my audience, most of them are educated people or college students. Yeah. So. But the pity is that 100 to 200 cannot make a theater company live for long.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
with just that little amount of core audience. Yeah.
And people go see musicals, road musicals, or what do they see? What do they see?
Theater in general, theater is still not yet a popular entertainment in Hong Kong. You see Warhorse in Hong Kong. They recently get a tour in Hong Kong, but it's the box office was a disaster. And
oh, really?
It's a disaster in Hong Kong. And
oh, it's such a popular show. That's amazing.
Yes, you can see. So you can see why. Because Hong Kong we haven't developed a.
But it's not your story, though. In other words, part of it is, I mean, that part of it's World War I, right? It's World War I Warhorse. That's not Hong Kongese story, right?
And it's not Shakespeare.
And it's not Shakespeare, right? A friend of mine, Tadashi Uchino, I said, how come you do so much Shakespeare? He said, Carol, Japanese people consider Shakespeare Japanese, which I thought was, okay, a perfect answer. Yeah.
It's just a pity we haven't yet developed enough audience for that. I still believe that theater can be related to the society, but yeah.
Absolutely, you have to find an in. Yeah, somehow.
Yeah. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to see you.